Hello, Sid Roth here with Rabbi Kurt Schneider. And the prophet Joel, it's just like it was written today, says in the last days that we are going to receive supernatural visions, supernatural dreams, in which God is going to literally direct our activities. I have Rabbi Kurt Schneider here. Kurt, the last thing in the world you ever thought you'd be is a Messianic Jewish rabbi, I'm sure.
Ain't that the truth?
Well, I mean, your big goal in life was to be the top wrestler in your high school. Tell me about that.
Well, I thought if I could become the state champ at the weight class that I wrestled at growing up, that was symbolic to me, Sid, of conquering the world. And I envisioned that I was going to become state champ, the referee was going to raise my hand, shows were going to go through my body, and then for the rest of my life I was just going to sit in the lounge chair on the beach and enjoy the sunshine and bask in the glory. I was not prepared for life after wrestling, and I came to a very rude awakening when I stepped off that wrestling mat after wrestling my last match in high school.
Well, I assume you lost.
You know, I would have had a loss because I would have been in the state tournament. So that is true. I got to the place that in my own mind I kind of achieved my goal in the sense that I was wrestling at a level where I felt there was nobody that I couldn't beat, but I never did achieve the goal of becoming state champ, although I did get a small scholarship to college. But the thing is that wrestling to me, my world was made up of people that wrestled in my weight class, and I didn't think beyond that. And obviously life is much bigger than people that wrestled 119 pounds in high school.
Okay, so you're frustrated and you do what I did. I come from a traditional Jewish background, and I figured that money will bring me happiness. Personally, I got into the New Age. You started reading books about gurus, and one night, what happened to you?
At the age of 20 years old in 1978, as I slept in my bedroom, Sid, in Pepper Pug, Ohio, an eastern suburb of Cleveland, at 3:30 in the morning, the Lord awoke me from my sleep. Now, let me say that no one had ever talked to me about Jesus. I was bar mitzvahed in a conservative home.
Wait a second, you're in Christian America. What do you mean no one ever talked to you about Jesus?
All my friends were Jewish. I only had one friend. I only had one friend growing up that wasn't Jewish, and he happened to wear a big cross around his neck, but not because he was a Christian. He was the toughest Italian in the high school, and I used to follow him around just to watch him beat people up. So no one told me about Jesus.
Okay, so you had no no frame of reference whatsoever.
Zero. And this night at 20 years old, I was lost in life. Wrestling had ended. I lacked identity. I lacked purpose. I was reading a book at the time, as you said, about a guru from India, that in the book there were pictures of him levitating off the ground. I said, God, I said, if this is real, I said, I want to be able to do this. And it was during that time of seeking at the age of 20 that the Lord awoke me, 3:30 in the morning, and suddenly with my eyes closed, Sid, I was aware that something was happening. It was as if I was being supernaturally transported into another dimension. It lasted no more than 3 seconds. Jesus appeared on the cross in this vision in the night. It was in color. I could see the terrain that the cross was staked in. There were people in the distance that looked on at him, even as I read about later in the New Testament that they looked on from a distance, and then a ray of red light beamed down on his head. And when I saw, Sid, the ray of red light from straight to the sky beam down on Yeshua's head, I knew that it was coming from God because the beam was coming from straight above, and that God was telling me that he was connected to Jesus. It lasted, like I said, no more than 3 seconds, but I knew that God had revealed himself to me. I got out of my bed, looked at my clock radio, like I said, it was 3:30 in the morning, and that was the beginning for me of seeking after Yeshua, Jesus.
So what if someone that doesn't know any Christians now believes that Jesus is real, obviously by this experience? In fact, it was almost as if you saw him being crucified.
Yeah, that's exactly what I saw.
I mean, they actually vent.
I believe that. I tend to believe that what I saw was that God supernaturally transported me back in time 2,000 years to literally see the site of the crucifixion.
So I guess you told your parents the good news. What did they say?
Well, they didn't say much at first because they thought it was just a dream and it would be over in a few days.
Now, were they very religious Jews?
No, not at all, but they were very much Jewish. You know, very much, my dad said, I'm a Jew from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. I mean, very, very strong in their Jewish identity, culture, social relationships, network, etc. So they didn't react much at first because they thought I would stop talking about it in a day. But when they saw that I was serious and I didn't stop talking about it.
It's a fad, he'll outgrow it.
Exactly. Exactly. So they eventually, really became very upset, very humiliated. Their Jewish son walking around their Jewish neighborhood talking about Jesus. And they hired the most famous deprogrammer in the country to come from California. They flew him in from California.
Did they trick you?
They did trick me.
Really? How'd they do that?
Well, my dad told me we were going to go talk to somebody about purchasing a restaurant. And so I thought we were going to be in business together. Well, he had some business, but it wasn't for me to be in the restaurant business with him. And basically, we walked into a hotel room, and the door shut behind me, and the deprogrammer said, he was there with two guys that were kind of his, bodyguards, and he said, we're going to talk about cults. And from that point on, I couldn't leave. I mean, I physically had one of them.
Did you ask to leave?
Yes, I did. I said, I'm not programmed. And he said, well, you've got nothing to worry about. I stood up, I said, well, can I leave? And one of his bodyguards said, sit down. So they took me to California for a couple weeks. Their idea was if we can get him away from whoever is programming him, then he'll snap out of it. I felt bad for my parents, actually, that they spent so much money. It cost them thousands and thousands of dollars. I felt bad for them that they wasted so much money.
But wait a second, you just had this vision out of the blue. Had you started reading the Bible?
No, I knew nothing about Jesus. Jesus was a non-issue for me. I mean, I never thought about him, never talked about him one way or the other.
That is amazing. So this deprogramming, it doesn't sound like it worked?
It didn't do, you know what, it was a shame because they didn't even really do anything. Once the initial session was over, they took me to California to their rehabilitation house, which was just, again, to get me away from whatever they thought was programming me. They took me to the beach in the day and the bars at night, and that was it.
Yes, but
Nothing
then how
changed.
come you ended up in a mental institution?
Because when that didn't work, they figured we got to do something. So they hired a Jewish psychiatrist from Cleveland with the agenda up front before even having met me, I believe, of getting me probated to the mental ward so that they could do whatever to snap me out of this thing. And one day I came home and they said, we've got somebody coming over, and this Jewish psychiatrist comes over, and we sit down. And I begin to tell him about Jesus and what would have happened to me if it wasn't for Jesus. And I literally, was impressed with myself that I had such a strong witness, I felt.
I'm impressed.
To this Jewish psychiatrist. But he just sat there and listened, and he was just waiting to bait me, so that I would tell him I had a vision of Jesus. And then what he did is he went to the courts and said, this guy's delusional. We need to get this guy where we can help him. And so, I came home a few days after that. And there were some suitcases that were sitting at the door. And I walked in, and my parents said, listen, we've probated you to the mental, to the mental institution.
And was this a legal thing? You could not say, I'm sorry, I'm not going on this trip?
In 2 months, they give you a hearing. And so they released me then at the 2 months. It wasn't actually a mental ward, it was the psychiatric wing of a hospital.
Sounds the same to me, but I'll tell you something. This must have been quite an impression on Kurt. From no framework at all, to literally be an eyewitness of Jesus dying for him. Well, let me tell you something. God is using this young man in a way that is going to so benefit you, in a way that you will understand your dreams clearer than you ever have before. Be right back after this word. Hello, YouTube. Mishpocha. Mishpocha is a Hebrew word. It means family. This is Sid Roth. Welcome to my world, where it's naturally supernatural. If you've been blessed by this show, please subscribe. Then click the bell so you won't miss a single episode of It's Supernatural.
We now return to It's Supernatural.
Hello, Sid Roth here with Rabbi Kurt Snyder, and this is amazing. This Jewish man had no reference at all, no understanding at all about Jesus. No one had shared the truth about Jesus to this Jewish man, but Jesus loved him so much, he came to him in a night visitation. And he has since become a Messianic Jewish rabbi. And I just coincidentally got an article from a Toledo newspaper here, The Blade, and let me read the first paragraph. It says, Rabbi Tovia Singer of New York will speak in Toledo on the topic, Jesus was a Jew. But can a Jew be for Jesus? There's only one acceptable answer to that question, according to the rabbi. An emphatic no. Well, Kurt, you did answer in the newspaper. I have the answer here, but would you answer that question right now if you were eyeball to eyeball with Rabbi Singer, what would you say to him?
Well, I would say that if Yeshua's the Messiah, then you can certainly be a Jew and believe in him. And that's really what it's all about. Of course, we know that I have faced tremendous antagonism from the traditional Jewish community because
Listen, even your own family, according to my notes,
Yes.
when you embraced Yeshua as the Messiah, your brother literally hit you?
He was so frustrated. He was so frustrated that he felt like he had lost his brother, that he didn't know me anymore. And so, yes, it was a very difficult time for my entire family. Lost almost my entire network of Jewish friends. Very, very difficult. And the bottom line is either Jesus is the Messiah or he's not the Messiah. And if he is the Messiah, the traditional Jewish community is wrong. And that's what my simple answer is to Rabbi Singer.
But even if he is, why would you risk being your parents not understanding it, your brother so angry he wants to hit you, even if he is? So why don't you just kind of keep it to yourself? Why so public?
Because I'm so excited about it, I can't help it. I mean, it's who I am.
Okay, I am fascinated by your series, and I told you this over the telephone, Prophecy, Dreams, and Visions, because for the first time, I have had dreams from God in which I have had literal dreams, but most of them are symbolic, and I haven't, to be candid, I haven't understood the symbolism that much, and I read a bunch of books on it, and to tell you the truth, I got even more confused from all of these books that I'm reading on it. So I was so delighted to get this, but you were talking about a medical doctor. Tell me that story.
Well, Ben Carson, a gifted surgeon, in fact, one of the most renowned surgeons in the world. And I read his book many years ago called Gifted Hands, and he tells the story, Sid, in the book, how he was in medical school working at the same time, and he fell behind in his studies because of the heavy responsibilities that he was carrying. He went to work one night, planned on studying for the exam. When he got home that night, which was to take place the next day, he got home, he was so tired, he began to study. He was so far behind in his studies, he got overwhelmed, he fell asleep, was not able to study for the exam. But in his sleep that night, he had a dream. And in the dream, said he saw a test, a medical exam. And not only did he see a medical exam, but he saw the answers to that exam in his dream.
That's my kind of test.
There you go. Wouldn't it be great if they were all like that? When he woke up the next morning and went to take the exam, he couldn't believe it when the exam that was set in front of him was the same exam he saw in his dream the night before, and he remembered the answers that he saw in his dream. He wrote them down, and obviously today he's one of the most well-known surgeons in the world. You know, dreams have been fascinating to me because my life really in Yeshua began with him revealing himself to me in a vision of the night. I remember in Bible school, Sid, back in the mid-1980s, we had a dog, and he was a beagle, and we lost him. He just took off, he ran away, he was gone for several months. I forgot about the dog. But one night I had a dream that we found the dog. The next day I got a phone call, someone found my dog. So I really began to pay attention to my dreams. And so,
yes, but are you just someone special? I mean, that God just works through you? I mean, not everyone has a dream where they can be an eyewitness of Jesus being crucified for them. So you must be obviously someone special.
Well, I believe that the purpose of dreams is God is communicating with us. And obviously, his purpose is to communicate with every single one of his children. No question about that. And the scripture says in Joel 2 and in Acts 2, which quotes the fulfillment of Joel 2, that the experience of those who have received his Spirit will be, number one, they'll be able to speak by inspiration of the Spirit. Number two, they'll be able to see in the Spirit. And thirdly, that they will dream dreams. So dreaming dreams is simply a way of receiving a revelation from the Lord in the night. I believe that when we're sleeping, we're loosed from a lot of the things that our mind is occupied with during the day.
Isn't that an ancient rabbinic understanding?
It is.
Explain that again.
Well, that when we're, if you're at work and you have a responsibility, you're sitting in front of your computer trying to get this job done in time, I mean, you're probably not thinking much about receiving a word from God. You're occupied with the business at hand. But when you sleep, you're loosed from a lot of those things. And it's in that state that we're oftentimes more receptive to hear God's voice. And all we have to do is look in the scriptures, look in a concordance under the word dream or dreamed, and people will be amazed to see that dreams are one of the most common vehicles that God has used from the beginning with Abraham, Joseph, Yeshua's dad, Joseph, Paul. one of the most common vehicles God has used scripturally from the beginning is that he communicates to his people through dreams. And I believe it's because we're more receptive. Let me just make this last comment. In Job chapter 33, we have some comments by Job's friend Elihu. And Elihu was the one friend of Job's that God did not have harsh words for, because Elihu gave Job good counsel. And this is what Elihu says in Job 33. He says, God speaks once, yea, twice, but no one listens when man is sound asleep in his bed. And so he's saying God's speaking while we're sleeping, but we need to be paying attention if we're going to hear.
Listen, pay attention. Don't go to sleep right now. You can do that later. But on the next segment, I really believe there is going to be revelation knowledge so that you will get dreams from God. Just listen. Don't go away.
We'll be right back to It's Supernatural.
Hello, Sid Roth here with Rabbi Kurt Schneider, and this is such a fascinating subject because all of us dream. Everyone dreams. And most of us think it's the pizza or what we were doing, that night before. But according to the Bible, in the last days, God is going to pour out His Spirit on all flesh, and we are going to have dreams and visions. But Rabbi Schneider, that was written really to the Jewish people, that Jewish people would have these dreams and visions. And I'm so glad for the one new man, because Israel is like an olive tree, Paul says, and there are the natural branches that get these dreams and visions, but a non-Jew can be grafted right in the wild olive tree branch and get all those dreams and visions. Give me a couple practical bits of advice when someone has a dream. What should they do?
Well, I think people need to form the discipline of waking up in the morning, and as soon as they wake up, so they need to ask themselves, what did I dream last night, as they look to the Lord for an awareness of that. Because to disregard our dreams is to disregard the voice of God. Let me say that again. To disregard our dreams is to disregard the voice of God. One of the most common vehicles, as I said on the previous session, is that God will speak to us through dreams. So we need to wake up in the morning, and instead of just getting a cup of coffee, brushing our teeth, hopping in the car, and flying off to work, we need to set up our alarm 15 minutes earlier, settle and say, Lord, what did I dream last night? What did you reveal to me last night? And then begin to write. And don't try to interpret it as you're writing. Just write exactly what you dreamed. And as you do that, what's going to happen is God is going to help you to recall what you dreamed. Now, there's no question about it. A lot of what we dream we'll never recall. And some people can recall their dreams easier than others.
Now, I have read in a lot of these books that a car means your job, and these various, there's like symbols, they mean different things. What do you think about that?
I don't think that you can take a symbol and say that it means the same thing to every person, because I believe that we're all unique, and God may use a symbol in a dream that is relevant for one thing in your life, and that same symbol may carry a different meaning in my life. I believe that the same person that gave us the dream will give us the interpretation of the dream. And I think it's very dangerous to just read a book and say, well, if you had a dream and the color red was in it, that means war. Because the color red can mean other things as well.
Now, in your Messianic Jewish congregation, you got some very specific supernatural guidance in a dream. It might have been a disaster if you hadn't. Tell me about that.
That's absolutely true. We were planning on purchasing a building. Sid actually had signed a contract to purchase the building, and about a week after I signed the contract, I had a dream one night. And in the dream, I was just a casual observer of a man that was buying a health food store. And he was buying this health food store on this really old street, old houses. He was the only commercial business on the street. And in addition to that, his business in this health food store was on the second floor of this building. You had to walk up these narrow steps to get there. And as I observed him doing this, I knew he was going to fail, because he was opening up his health food store in a terrible location. I got up the next morning. I said, what did I dream last night? I literally forced myself to write it down, because I thought that means nothing. What do I know about them? Nothing. But I forced myself, because I was in the discipline of writing down my dreams, to begin to write. And as soon as I began to write, Sid, all of a sudden it occurred to me, Kurt, you're in the health business.
Right.
And all of a sudden God gave me revelation. You know what? He was opening up his health food store in the same geographical type of a scenario that I was in contract to purchase this building. Our building was the only commercial building on the street. It was a very narrow street, very old neighborhood, and immediately I called my leadership together. I said, I feel God has spoken to me. I don't think this is the answer for us. We need to start looking around. And God supernaturally came through at the midnight hour, and a pastor called me up and said, don't buy that building. He said, I want you to take over my building right here. We're now meeting in a building that was offered to us by a pastor. My congregation has doubled, and it would have never happened if I would have purchased that building I was in contract for, because we were already too full to fit anybody else in there. We would have been 5 years before we would have been able to build in the back, which was what the plan was.
You even are getting very specific advice to counsel members of your congregation. Give me an example.
One of the most awesome experiences that I've had in my ministry was a dream I had about a woman in my congregation. Beautiful, sweet woman, just a joy of God. The presence of God is on her. And I had a dream one night that she was in this basement. It was dark down there, and she was canning. Just canning food. I walked down the basement. I felt something very evil down there. I didn't see her doing anything evil. I just felt an evil presence. I said to her, I'm going to make up a fictitious name now. Mary Ann. I said, come on in the dream. Let's get out of here. There's something down here that's going to destroy you. Let's get out of here. She wouldn't come. 2-3 times I said, we need to get out of here. She wouldn't come. I had no idea what it meant because I wasn't aware of any sin in her life. I wrote the dream down and forgot about it. Several months later, must have been a half year later roughly, her husband comes to me. He says, listen, I'm not going to be able to go any farther in my ministry with you until I settle a problem I'm having in my marriage. I said, well, what's the problem? He says, well, my wife, she just won't be intimate with me. And I said, well, was she willing to talk? He said, let me see. So he says, yes. So we bring them in, we begin to consult, and I said to her, Mary Ann, I said, this is not right. I said, this is not biblical, this is not spiritual, this is not healthy. And I began to tell her why. And each time I told her why it was wrong, she would make an excuse. And finally, I realized, the dream came to me. I remember in the dream, I said, come on, we need to get out of here. It didn't seem like, in her own mind, she wasn't doing anything wrong by not being intimate with her husband. Just like canning didn't seem like there was anything wrong in the dream. I said, you know what, Mary Ann? I had a dream about you about 6 months ago, and now I know what it means. I shared it with her. Sid, she was delivered in an instant from that. Her husband and her have the best relationship they've ever had in their life, and it's been like this for a year now. What counselors could not do, they've been to counselors for years about these problems. God did in an instant through giving me revelation in a dream and making her problem exposing it for what it was to her.
It was beyond that, Kurt. Here's what I believe took place. When you shared that God cared enough about her to give you a dream about her, I believe that actually was a supernatural anointing that took the shackles off of her. That's what I believe occurred.
Absolutely.
It's tell me one other brief dream.
Another man in our congregation, to show that this is for everybody. Upon all flesh, the Lord says, I will pour forth my Spirit through Yeshua, everyone that's received him. A man in our congregation, former Jehovah Witness, left the Jehovah Witness, started attending our congregation. He was taught as a Jehovah Witness that he shouldn't receive communion, that the only people,
Which is a miniature Passover Seder. That's what communion is, the Last Supper, but go ahead.
Absolutely. And he was taught that unless you've specifically heard from God that you're one of the select 144,000 that's going to heaven rather than the recreated earth. I mean, it's a long story, but you shouldn't receive communion. He didn't have the confidence to receive communion. He didn't feel he had heard from the Lord, that he was one of these select few that was going to heaven. So I would serve communion every time I see he wasn't taking it. And he just said, I'm stuck in this thing. One night he had a dream. And in the dream, he saw Jesus, Yeshua, moving through our congregation, offering to each person what they needed. To one, he would just give a hug and give his love to. To another, he would heal their body. Then he came up to this member in our congregation in his dream and served him communion, and he was set free, and he's been receiving communion and God's forgiveness and love through that, Sid, ever since. And I could go on and on and on and on.
But this series here, when people listen to this CD, what feedback do you get or this teaching?
Oh, people, as they begin, it raises their level of expectancy and faith. They begin to pay attention, and they begin to find God speaking to them in the night.
I believe there's a supernatural presence on this for you to have dreams and visions that you understand. I had a dream recently, and as a matter of fact, it happened after I listened to this series. And in the dream, I saw a book of my life, and I could only read 3 words. Oh, were they wonderful words. The 3 words that I read were all the same. It was blessing, blessing, blessing. I say to you that in Messiah, you didn't get that dream. That dream was for me. But in Messiah, I say to you that if Yeshua is your Messiah and Lord, if you've repented of your sins, you've told God you're sorry, and you're ready to know God through Messiah Yeshua, to have Yeshua live inside of you according to God's promises, He wants to surround you with His love. He wants to surround you with His purpose. He wants to surround you with His shalom. He wants to surround you with blessing, blessing, and blessing in your spirit, in your soul, and in your body. Yes, there is something more. Blessing is Yeshua, Yeshua, Yeshua. Yeshua, Yeshua, Yeshua.